We are back now with some breaking economic data.
Yeah, that's right. The October inflation report has just been released. It shows inflation rose by 7.7% on the year and 0.4% on the month. Here to walk us through these numbers, we're joined by NBC News business and data reporter Brian Cheung. Also, the editor-in-chief of Investopedia, Caleb Silver, is with us. Thank you both for being here. And Brian, I will start with you and this data. Break down these numbers for us. How do they compare with what we saw last month?
Yes, Savannah, we got a little bit of good news on the inflation front. The number for how much prices grew in the month of October, 7.7%. That was lower, by the way, than the street's estimates of about 7.9%, and also a slower pace than we saw in the month of September, where it was 8.2%. And also recall earlier in the year, it was pacing at about 9.1%. So you're starting to see that number come down a little bit, although we are still far away from about the 2% target that the nation's central bank, the Federal Reserve, would like to see it. So prices still rising at a rapid pace, but albeit a little bit slower than we've seen earlier this year.
Caleb, let's bring you in here. What's your reaction to these numbers? Any surprises here?
Well, better than expected, but we're still seeing the inflation in the places where it hurts the most. That's food, that's energy, and that's shelter. The Bureau of Labor Statistics noting that shelter making up about half of the increase. So rent prices keep increasing. They're starting to ease a little bit in areas around the Northeast, but still the things that we spend on every single week, every single month are very expensive for consumers. But it's nice to see that rate come down. And by the way, this is the lowest rate all since January. So the biggest decrease since January. It may show that those interest rates are starting to work.
Yeah, that could be a little bit of good news. Let's dig in more specifically on those particular breakouts that you just mentioned. Caleb, Brian, tell us about what numbers we are seeing in categories shelter, food, gasoline.
Yeah, well, these are the three biggest expenditures for American households. And what we're looking at here is the monthly change. So this is the difference between August and September. Shelter at that time, again, this is rent and also the equivalent payments for your mortgages up 0.7 percentage points. Not good news this month, as that actually increased to 0.8% between September and October. Food, though, the pace of price increase is getting a little bit slower, up 0.6%. And then I also want to add here, hopefully you can read my handwriting here, gasoline went down between August and September, down 4.9%. That trend actually reversing as gasoline went up about 4% between September and October. That lines up with the fact that average price of a gallon of gas went up from about $3.80 to $3.92 during that period. So shelter, just the cost of rent remaining a very, very high price pressure.
Caleb, you mentioned interest rates. Probably no one's paying closer attention to these numbers right now than the Fed. So what do you think the Fed's going to do when they see these numbers? Say, hey, we're on the right path. This is working. Are they going to change things moving forward?
Well, this is, if you look at the reaction in the stock market, investors are probably betting that the Fed is going to cool it a little bit on the next interest rate hike. That next meeting is happening in December. The banking right now, the thinking is that it'll be a 0.5% increase, not another 0.75% increase. This may slow their roll even a little bit more and into 2023. So the stock market reacting, saying, hey, the Fed's may cool it a little bit here. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of talk a little bit more about that and try to explain it in some simple terms here. So inflation staying persistently high, Brian, but, you know, as Caleb just mentioned, maybe these are some signs that these interest rate hikes are working. Is that something that a consumer at home can take away? Maybe say, hey, that'll lay off eventually soon?
Well, it might be working from the perspective that you're not seeing those inflation rates continue to rise. But look, this is a chart of the year-over-year rates that we've seen over the last year. And you can see it's not really going down. It's kind of going sideways. That 7.7% figure, if I try to connect the dots here, roughly around there. So this is not the downward decline, the sharp decline that Americans would like to see. So at the store, you're not observing the impact of those interest rate hikes. But remember, economists have said once they start to do these interest rate hikes, it could take as long as 6 to 9 months to actually feel the impact of that, meaning that the Fed began this journey in March of this year. We might not start to see the impact of that until right about now. So maybe we'll start to see that come down, hopefully in the next few months, but at least markets and perhaps other Fed analysts and inflation watchers around the country, hopefully taking a little bit of solace that the number went down as opposed to going up.
Caleb, we're just coming out of the midterms. We know inflation is a top issue among voters. That being said, the Fed is independent from the government, and sometimes it's unclear what Congress can actually do to control inflation. What do you expect Congress to do, if anything, moving forward to try and help this process along?
Yeah, not a lot that they can do. We may see some more policies trying to be pushed out by the Biden administration, but we may have that gridlock that we spoke about yesterday that could prevent any new measures. So they can't do much about it, although you're going to hear a lot of politicians talking about how it's finally easing as of the last report. Remember, this is all rear view mirror. At the same time, to Brian's point, we're going to be up here for a while. It's not like we go right back down the hill and the Fed starts cutting rates. This is the new normal.
All right, Brian Cheung and Caleb Silver breaking down this breaking news. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.